It is November the 7th, which means we are officially 1 week into November. And this past week, I've really been contemplating pretty heavy about the cause. The cause that I'm talking about is, of course, Movember, which is really my way of saying I've been contemplating bringing back the stash. I've already got a beard, so really all I have to do is kind of shave it off. But then we're talking Stash Town. Stash Town, USA, population, good times. Insanely good times. So it's pretty much decided at this point. I am gonna go get cleaned up, gonna shave off this beard. We're gonna be rocking a fierce stash, and then we're gonna get things started inside of the video. You already know what it is. So, as I said, today is November 7th, which means not only are we a week into the month of November, but we are 2 weeks into my lean bulk. And I wanted to just kind of take a moment and just touch on what's different this time around versus the last time that I tried to bulk 2 years ago. And so I want to touch on, from a training perspective, what's different, from a nutrition perspective, what's different, from a mindset perspective, what's different. And, hopefully you guys can find this relatable, and hopefully you can take some value away from it and understand that, we all go through the same things. We all think similar thoughts, and it's the struggles that we overcome that ultimately allow us to get to where we want to go. So from the training standpoint, when I was bulking 2 years ago, I started that bulk in January of 2019. It lasted about 6 months, and during that time, I was actually running a Kino Body program. I was doing the superhero bulking program. And so if you know anything about Kino Body, you know that all of his programs, with the exception of his aggressive fat loss program, there's a kind of a 2-day split there. But the majority of his programs are 3-day splits where you hit each muscle group once a week. But on the superhero bulking program, there are different periods where you sort of emphasize one muscle group, and during that time, you'll hit that particular muscle group twice a week instead of just once like you do with the majority of his programs. And so I ran that program, and for me, 3 days just wasn't sufficient volume for consistent muscle gain. A lot of the principles behind those programs, behind Kino Body programs, are really sound. And I think that the exercises in those programs are really sound. But in my subjective opinion, my subjective experience, it was not sufficient volume for me. Doesn't necessarily mean it's not sufficient for you, but was not sufficient volume for me to make consistent progress in the gym. Granted, I did get a lot stronger during that time period, by following that program, and I did make some tweaks. I think back in the day, there's been sort of a shift now in some of his programming because people keep calling him out for not training legs. But I kind of tweaked the leg days so that I was doing squats and, some deadlift variations that weren't originally written in. But again, for me, the volume just wasn't sufficient for consistent gains. I was making strength gains, but there wasn't quite enough hypertrophy for me to grow the size of my muscles at a consistent rate. And so now, the key difference is I'm not running a 3-day split, I'm now running a 4-day split, and I'm hitting every muscle group twice a week instead of just the 1 or the 2 that I'm emphasizing during that particular training phase. By doing that, I'm getting more volume overall. And then again, I've talked about this in a previous video. Right now, I'm doing an emphasis on my chest. And so for these first 8 weeks, for this first phase, I'm emphasizing growing the upper chest. So total volume is greater than it was 2 years ago during my last bulk. And then again, I have that disproportionate increase in volume, emphasizing the particular muscle group. And so 3 years ago, the program I was running, had that similar disproportionate increase in volume, but the volume overall just wasn't enough for me. So that's the key difference, from a strength training perspective for me, is that I'm training with more volume and I'm training at a higher frequency. 4-day split instead of 3, and I'm hitting every muscle group twice a week instead of just 1. In conjunction to the strength training, from a cardio standpoint, 2 years ago, I was not doing shit. I was not doing any cardio whatsoever because, I sort of believed that myth that cardio kills your gains. And it can, it's not like there isn't any legitimacy to that claim. Doing extra cardio, when you're on a bulk, does 2 things. Number 1, it helps you increase your stamina because you're training your cardiovascular health and improving your cardiovascular health, but it also raises your total daily energy expenditure. And so if you're someone that struggles to gain weight, it can definitely hinder your progress because you just have to eat a lot more than someone that doesn't necessarily struggle to gain weight. I've never been someone that struggles to get enough calories in. So I really had no excuse for not doing cardio. That's been a key difference. I have made it really this entire year, actually. I have made it a point to get in minimum 10,000 steps a day. And, as I'm transitioning into this lean bulk, that hasn't changed. I'm still making it a goal to get 10,000 steps a day. And obviously I've shown my dogs in my videos before. 2 Siberian Huskies, Max and Dakota. But they obviously require a lot of exercise, and so that keeps me accountable for getting those steps in. And honestly, I would say most days I go over 10,000 just because, I do my normal activity, and, on top of that, I've got my 2 dogs to take care of. And something I started doing at the beginning of the year, when I was actually doing another Keto Body program, I was doing the movie star body. I was one of the original 300, and something I kind of picked up from being in that coaching program was don't waste your rest periods in the gym. When you're doing reverse pyramid training, you're resting for 2 to 3 minutes at a time. So say you're on bench, instead of just sitting on the bench for 2 to 3 minutes, just walk around the gym. And I noticed that by getting more out of my rest periods and not wasting them, I would get out of the gym with 4,000 or 5,000 steps already done for the day. And so it made attaining that step count a lot easier, and it's something I've continued with getting back into the gym. And that on top of the fact that I had found other ways to get those steps in, during quarantine, because I wasn't in the gym, I was working out at home. Obviously it's kind of difficult to pace around my house and get 5,000 steps in. So I'm kind of doing what I was doing in quarantine on top of, getting those steps in and not wasting those rest periods in the gym. So I'm keeping my step count very high. So that's another big difference, between the last bulk, and my current lean bulk strategy. So on the nutrition front, I would say that this is probably where things differ the most. This is where I would say you would find the most stark contrast. There was really no rhyme or reason to my nutrition 2 years ago. I have always thought of myself as being a hard gainer, but the fact of the matter is, I don't think I am, because my appetite consistently exceeds, my maintenance calories, and so for me, my maintenance is around 2,800. It is so easy for me to eat beyond that. And so, again, 2 years ago, there was no rhyme or reason. I think I was trying to get in protein, but at the end of the day, I was just eating, and a lot of what I was eating was just pure shit. And I think it kind of got to that point because, kind of touching on my mindset a little bit, my mindset was I want the number on the scale to be going up, and I want it to be going up consistently, pound a week at least. I consistently want to see that number going up. And so I would get to a point where that progress would kind of slow, it was kind of inconsistent. And so I would, kind of think of that as, okay, well, I guess I just need to eat more. Of course, I wasn't eating good, clean calories. I was just eating shit. I think I've talked about this before. I think I got to a point where I was baking brownies like multiple nights a week. I'd go to the store, and if brownie mix was BOGO, I was copping 4 boxes of brownie mix, and I was eating just a shit ton of snacks. When I finally did start my cut and kind of got my tracking locked in, I found out I was eating close to 1,500 calories a day just in snacks. Of course, this is an estimate because I was not tracking at that point, and the tracking I was doing at that point was not really even correct most of the time. I was probably eating north of 4,000 calories every single day, maybe even closer to 4,500, and it wasn't good food. A lot of fats, a lot of carbs. I might have been getting sufficient protein, it's hard to say, but my diet was just a mess. There was no strategy to it. It was just me binging and gorging myself on all the foods I had deprived myself of, during my previous cut. Because actually transitioning into that bulk, I was coming out of a period where I was doing strictly bodyweight exercises. I took, 3 or 4 months off from the gym. I was kind of in between jobs, didn't want to pay for a gym membership, so I was doing a lot of calisthenics, and I was also doing keto because I wanted to keep my body fat levels low. And so if you've ever done keto, obviously there's some really good meals you can eat on keto, and keto is very effective, but it's also very restrictive. And so, I kind of yo-yoed from one end to the other and just went from eating strict keto to just eating like shit. And I really ballooned up. I think I put on, over 20 pounds in 6 months. And I think I've said this before. I don't know how much of that was muscle. I don't know how much of that was fat. I know a lot of it was fat, because from that point up until really kind of early spring of this year, I went down from 195 to 164 at my leanest, so I dropped over 30 pounds over the course of just about a year. And that was just the result of poor nutrition, poor focus, and just a flawed mindset, kind of going into that bulk. Like I said, the only number that mattered to me was the number on the scale. From a nutrition standpoint, I just wanted to see that number on the scale go up, which is a stark contrast to sort of my mindset now, where if that number goes up, and again, I'm only 2 weeks in, but just, in the past 8 weeks of getting back to lifting weights consistently, there's certainly been a consistent recomp effect. I'm much fuller now than I was 8 weeks ago. 8 weeks ago I looked like a skinny kid that was pretty fit, and I'm back now 8 weeks into looking like a guy that lifts. And so, I've mentioned this before, I spent about a year and a half just focused purely on getting lean. And it wasn't a year and a half of straight eating in a caloric deficit. I took some diet breaks, ate around maintenance. But for a year and a half, my focus was staying lean and getting lean. And so now that I'm, transitioning into a lean bulk, it's been kind of the challenge for me because I watch the number on the scale and I don't want it to move fast. I want it to move slow. My goal over the next 4 months, I'm doing 2 8-week phases, about a 16-week, 4-month, lean bulk. I started around 170, 172. Ideally, I'd like to end around 180. And I weighed in this morning actually at about 174. And, obviously there are a wide variety of variables that can contribute to that weight being where it is. But realistically, I would like to end phase 1 around 175, and for me to be 2 weeks in and around 174 is a little worrisome for me. But admittedly, I have not been as consistent with my tracking as I should be. And from a nutrition standpoint, that's another thing that's changed quite a bit. I thought I knew how to track. I didn't know shit about tracking. I didn't really get locked in on tracking food correctly until I actually got into that Movie Star Body coaching program. One of the biggest takeaways for me from the coaching experience was that I learned how to track my food correctly. And as a result of that, I have a lot more confidence in what I'm eating just because I know I'm tracking it correctly. And when you're tracking everything correctly and you get really kind of keyed in on that particular habit, it gives you the ability to be a lot more flexible with your diet because, at the end of the day, as long as you track it, and you're aware of how much you're consuming, you can, stay on the right path. So on the nutrition front, that's another, key difference. I am tracking and I'm tracking correctly, and I have a goal set for myself. I think my calorie goal, I think I had a calorie goal for myself 2 years ago, but I think I set it at like 4,000. My goal right now is 2,800, and, we'll see if I have to go a little bit higher. Admittedly, I haven't been the most consistent with tracking, with hitting that number. I would say the majority of the time over the last couple of weeks, I've probably been more in the 3,000 to 3,200 ballpark. But truthfully, if you look at some of the physique updates, I'm trying to do a weekly physique update just to kind of, track this whole thing, so that I kind of know what's working, what's not working, and can make adjustments where necessary. But I have maintained a high degree of leanness. Obviously I'm only 2 weeks in, but I haven't noticed, any significant loss in the level of leanness that I'm walking around at as a result of eating closer to 3,000 or even 3,200. A lot of that is the fact that my expenditure in these first 2 weeks is kind of up. Increasing my training volume had a very similar effect to sort of the initial recomp that I did when I first got back into the gym. And it sort of fluctuates now between, 26, 2,700, say on a rest day where I'm not lifting, but I'm still getting my 10,000 steps in versus, training day, especially like a high volume lower body day. I'll go north of 3,000 calories for expenditure. And if I'm eating at 2,800, I'm technically in a deficit, and, I'm trying to add size, so that's not really optimal, but I'm trying to look at the weekly average as far as calories go and sort of base what I do moving forward off of that. Yeah, so just to touch on the mindset a bit more, I think that's kind of the key difference this time around. There's just been much more of an emphasis in my mind on maintaining leanness through the bulk, because at the end of the day, that's what makes it a true lean bulk, is maintaining leanness through the bulk. And so my focus is, as far as the number on the scale goes, is so different because I don't want it to go up. It's been really difficult for me to make that shift because I spent so much time trying to get lean that I'm just afraid to throw that all away, and I kind of have to let go of that. And, obviously I understand that putting on some body fat is just a part of the process, but I want to mitigate that as much as possible. And so, from a nutrition standpoint, and a mindset standpoint, I'm really trying to get my nutrition dialed in to where that number is on the scale is going up at a rate that I'm happy with and at a rate that I'm comfortable with. And for me, that's going to be 1 to 2 pounds a month, which is very different from 2 years ago where the goal was a pound a week, so 4 to 5 pounds a month. But 2 weeks in, that's what I'm noticing as being the key differences. Training with more volume, actually doing cardio, and actually having some structure to my nutrition. Not only that structure, but really understanding what it is that I'm eating and having the knowledge and the ability to track it all correctly. So I guess I would say, if I had any advice for you going into a lean bulk, those are the 3 things that I would focus on. Getting your training to where you have sufficient volume for consistent muscle gain. Consistently doing cardio. Don't stop doing cardio just because you're trying to bulk. bulk, and then really having some structure and some strategy to your nutrition. Otherwise, you're just gonna end up dirty bulking, eating like shit, and putting on a bunch of unwanted body fat. I hope you guys found value in this video. If you want to continue to follow my journey and follow this lean bulk over the next, we're 2 weeks in, so over the next 14 weeks, definitely hit that subscribe button, turn on post notifications so you don't miss a single video. Throw this video a thumbs up and comment down below if you've made it to this point. My name is Sid Jackson. I'll see you guys in the next one. Can I just say, what is freaking going on, guys? We are literally inside of this video right now. We are literally inside of this video. Man, look at that shit. That shit in the soul patch, bro.